My name is Graham Holt, and for 3 months I have driven my mother-in-law, Iris Maddox, to every single physical therapy appointment after she shattered her hip. Each morning I slid behind the wheel of my blue Toyota Corolla, rolled down my window against the chill, and watched the sunrise warm the pavement as I headed north toward the clinic. No complaints crossed my lips. My wife, Maribel, was a tireless nurse working 12-hour hospital shifts, and I was more than willing to shoulder this responsibility. It wasn't glamorous, just me, my trusty car, and a frail woman balancing on a walker, but I considered it my duty, an act of kindness for someone who had once welcomed me into her family. I strapped Iris into the passenger seat, secured her walker in the trunk, and navigated winding side streets until we reached the bright glass facade of the physical therapy center. Iris would shuffle inside with surprising determination, her thin frame bent forward but her resolve unmistakable. I would sit in the waiting area, leafing through outdated magazines, and watch her through the large windows as she worked with therapists to rebuild strength in her broken hip. Sometimes she grunted through a difficult set of exercises. Other times she smiled when she realized she could stand a little taller. At the end of each session, I would pop outside, greet her with a cheerful wave, and help her back into the car. We would laugh about trivial things, the weather, a recipe she planned to try, my attempts at cooking. Then I would drive her home, park in her driveway, open the door for her, and make sure she settled onto the sofa before I headed back to work. I didn't mention it to anyone, certainly not to Maribel, how much I missed her. I would glance at the clock on my dashboard and count the minutes until I could return home to her embrace, but I never let it show. Helping Iris was a small price to pay for her recovery and for Maribel's peace of mind. My routine was precise. Drive, wait, return. Over and over again, day after day, until one random Wednesday in late March. I arrived that afternoon under a pale, overcast sky. Rain threatened to fall in fat droplets, but the streets remained dry. I parked in the spot I'd claimed as mine, unlocked the car, and rummaged in the glove box for the phone number of the clinic, intending to call and remind them I'd be there at 12:30. My phone buzzed with an email notification, and I leaned back to check it. Scheduled change, shift swapped, nothing urgent. I shrugged, pocketed the phone, and strolled toward the entrance, my key ring jingling. When I returned 45 minutes later, my blue Corolla sat alone. No sign of Iris's walker, no warm passenger door handle to confirm she'd been waiting only moments ago. Panic fluttered in my chest as I peered through the tinted windows. I unlocked the car and sank into the driver's seat, heart pounding. I dialed Maribel's number, voice trembling, but it went straight to voicemail. I assumed Iris must have left, maybe with someone else, maybe she drove off in a taxi. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. An hour passed, and the first drops of rain fell. My shirt clung to my back as I paced the sidewalk. I called the clinic manager, Joel Lancaster, who assured me Iris had checked out at 12:06 and left with her son-in-law, blue Toyota. Relief struck me in a wave, but it was tempered by confusion. How had she left? How had I not seen her? Joel promised to check the security footage. I waited under the clinic's awning, drenched and shivering, until Joel emerged with an apology and a printout of the sign-in log. I read the neat, clinical entry, March 12th, Iris Maddox, pickup, son-in-law, blue Toyota, and the knot in my stomach loosened. I hadn't abandoned her. I had done exactly what I did every other time. I called Maribel again, this time shaking through each ring. When she answered, her voice was ice. You left her outside for over an hour, she accused. You think that's acceptable? I tried to explain, my words tumbling out too quickly, but she cut me off. Don't lie to me, she said, her tone so cold I felt blood drain from my face. She's been calling me in tears. Tears. Iris had cried wolf, and Maribel had believed her sight unseen. I'm sorry. I managed, but Maribel's next words were more devastating than any thunderclap. Apologize, she demanded. Or leave. The line went silent, and my world tilted. I stared at the rain-streaked windshield as the clinic's neon sign flickered. All those weeks of driving, all those early mornings and late afternoons, had meant nothing if a single accusation could erase them. I thought of the soft look in Maribel's eyes when we first met, the way she cradled my hand after our wedding ceremony, the warmth of her embrace when she whispered, "Thank you," in my ear. And all of it seemed to slip away in that moment of anger and betrayal. Without another word, I hung up, grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat, and left. I walked through the drizzling rain, head bowed, mind racing. 3 months of unwavering devotion had led to this, the demand to apologize for nothing or to vanish. My heart ached, but I felt a strange clarity settle over me. I could not stay where I was not believed, where my every act of service could be dismissed by a single lie. I opened the door to my own home one last time, looked at the empty hallway where Maribel and Iris would have stood, and turned away. I walked into the wet afternoon with nothing but the duffel over my shoulder and resolve in my chest. I left behind my marriage, my home, my life as I knew it, unwilling to grovel for forgiveness that was not deserved. Behind me, the front door clicked shut and the rain washed away my footprints. I drove away, hearing in my mind the faint echo of Maribel's words, apologize or leave, and knowing that I had chosen the only path I could walk with my head held high. I woke up in Toby's guest room with a sore neck and a storm sitting in my chest. The kind that doesn't pass with time, only builds pressure. His place was cramped, one-bedroom walk-up above a noisy bakery, but he didn't ask questions when I showed up the night before. Just tossed me a clean towel and pointed at the linen closet. That's the kind of brother he is. No judgment, no lectures, just presence. But even his quiet support couldn't stop the reel playing in my head. Iris's trembling voice. Maribel's stare, cold and immovable. You left her outside the clinic. That lie had been simple, effective, devastating. And the worst part? Maribel didn't even ask me what happened. 15 years of marriage, and my word was suddenly negotiable. Iris spoke, and I was guilty. I couldn't eat that morning. I just sat at Toby's tiny kitchen table, staring into a cup of black coffee, bitterness rising with every sip. There was a hollow place in my chest where peace used to live. I kept thinking, why would Iris lie? That was the question that wouldn't leave me alone. What possible gain came from this? Was she confused? Embarrassed? Was it some kind of manipulative tactic she'd crafted in silence? Toby tossed me a set of spare keys before heading out for his shift. Don't let this stew too long, man. Go get answers, he said before slamming the door shut behind him. And I knew he was right. I needed more than questions. I needed facts. By noon, I was back at the clinic. Joel Lancaster, the office manager, was seated behind the front desk with a half-eaten sandwich and a bored expression. He looked up, startled when he saw me. Graham, hey, everything all right with Iris? That question hit differently now. I stepped closer and kept my voice steady. Joel, I know this is a weird request, but I need to see the sign-out logs from earlier this week. March 12th. He blinked, chewing slowly. Sure. 1 second. No hesitation. No suspicious squint. Just cooperation. Joel disappeared into the back and returned a minute later with a thick binder. The kind that creaks when you open it. He thumbed through the pages until he reached the one I needed. March 12th. He slid it across the counter. There it was. Iris Maddox. Check-in, 11:02 a.m. Appointment with Dr. Singh. Sign out, 12:06 p.m. And just beneath that scrawled in ink, picked up by son-in-law, blue Toyota. My chest tightened. Can I take a photo of this? I asked. Joel shrugged. Sure, just don't post it online or anything. HIPAA rules and all that. I snapped the photo with trembling fingers. For a second, I just stared at the image. That signature didn't just document a pickup. It documented presence. My presence. It wasn't just a defense, it was a reversal. I hadn't abandoned Iris. She'd signed out with me. The lie wasn't just mistaken, it was deliberate. And suddenly, everything inside me sharpened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. Joel leaned on the counter, oblivious to the storm rising in my head. Iris doing okay, though? She's a tough cookie. I nodded, tucking my phone back into my pocket. Yeah, she's something. He chuckled without noticing the shift in my tone. I left the clinic without saying goodbye, stepping into the brisk Saturday air with my jaw clenched and my thoughts sprinting ahead of me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. The signature kept flashing in my mind like a warning light. I thought about all the other pickups I'd made. 18 appointments in total, all logged, all witnessed. And yet, one lie had cut through all of that like a blade. Why? Was it really just manipulation? Or something more? I opened my phone and scrolled to my email, fingers hovering. Then I typed, Maribel, I just left the clinic. Got a copy of the March 12th sign-out sheet. Iris listed me as her pickup, 12:06 p.m., Blue Toyota. I didn't leave her. I'm not coming home until we talk about why you believed her without even asking me. Graham, I stared at the message for a beat before hitting send. It felt like throwing a stone into a deep well. I didn't expect a reply, but silence would tell me everything I needed to know. The ride back to Toby's was short, but it felt endless. I kept replaying the signature, that stupid blue ink looped across the page like a flag waving in the wind. Iris hadn't been vague. She'd specified me, my car, the time. And then she turned around and told Maribel a completely different story. That took calculation. That took gall. That took intent. Back in the guest room, I laid on the lumpy mattress and stared at the ceiling. I thought about how many times I'd lifted that walker into my truck. How many times I'd waited patiently, smiled at her, opened doors for her. And for what? So she could twist it into a betrayal? And what about Maribel? No conversation. No questions. Just judgment. Just an order. Apologize. Or leave. So I left. But now, I had more than just bruised pride. I had proof. And the more I stared at that photo, the more I knew. This was just the start. I didn't know why Iris was doing this. But I was sure of one thing now. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd told a lie, and I was going to find out just how far it went. I sat cross-legged on Toby's guest bed, the clinic logs spread around me like a crime scene. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I didn't check it. Probably another reminder from the bank or an email I didn't have the emotional capacity to answer. I was focused on one thing, making sure every lie Iris told was matched with a receipt. The pages felt heavier than they looked. Each one with my name. Each one dated, time-stamped, and signed with the same words. Pick up by son-in-law, Blue Toyota. I stared at March 12th for a long time, committing the shape of her signature to memory. That one had broken everything. I hadn't heard from Maribel since I sent the email. No reply. Not even a read receipt. Just silence. And after 15 years of marriage, silence was its own kind of violence. That was what really got to me, how quickly the door closed behind me, how little she tried to wedge it open after I left. One accusation, one emotionally charged lie, and she let it define me without hesitation. No call. No visit. Not even a question. It was as if I'd been erased. But I couldn't go back. Not now. Not with just one piece of paper. People don't believe the first time. They find excuses. They tell themselves, maybe she's right anyway. I knew if I wanted to stand my ground, I needed more. I called the clinic. Joel answered on the third ring. Graham, hey, everything okay? Actually, I said, voice tight, I need a copy of all the sign-in logs. February and March. Every day Iris came in. He didn't question it. Come by after 3. I'll have them ready. That afternoon, I drove back to the clinic, jaw clenched, the same blue Toyota that had been unfairly dragged into this dragging me now. Joel handed me a manila envelope, thicker than I expected. There's also a digital scan on the flash drive inside, he said. Just in case. I thanked him and walked out feeling like I was holding a detonator. Back at Toby's, I laid out the logs on the kitchen table. 18 sessions. 18 dates. And there I was, every time. Picked up by son-in-law, in neat cursive or shaky block letters. Sometimes it just said Graham. Sometimes it said G. Holt. But always me. Every single time. There wasn't a single blank entry. Not once had Iris left without me signing for her, walking her out, lifting her walker into the trunk. I remembered those days so clearly. Her complaining about the weather, asking if I'd heard back about that potential promotion, telling me to avoid a certain therapist because he talked too much. None of it sounded like a woman afraid of being alone with me. I pulled out my laptop and drafted the email I'd been building in my head all morning. Maribel, attached are all of your mother's clinic sign-out logs for February and March. 18 appointments. 18 documented pickups. All by me. All on time. You can look at the handwriting, the dates, the timestamps. This is an opinion. This is fact. I never left her. Not once. You didn't ask me. You didn't even pause long enough to wonder if there was another side to the story. That silence. It's louder than anything Iris said. I'm not coming back to a place where truth has no weight. But you deserve to see this. I wanted you to see it. Graham, I attached the scan Joel gave me and hit send. Then I closed the laptop and just sat there in Toby's silent kitchen, the refrigerator humming behind me like white noise against the storm in my chest. My hands were still trembling, but this time it wasn't rage. It was grief. I wasn't just proving myself right. I was watching the last threads of my marriage unravel. Maribel didn't respond that night. I stared at my phone until the battery died. Charged it. Checked again. Nothing. Around 10, Toby came home from work and found me exactly where he left me, still at the table, eyes hollow. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, but I've never been this certain about anything before." He sat across from me and reached for one of the locks. "Man, this is airtight. She can't ignore this." I shrugged. "She already is." He sighed. "So what now?" "Now," I said slowly, "I figure out why Iris lied in the first place. Because if this was just about a misunderstanding, she would have backed down the moment she saw the truth." Toby nodded. "Yeah, but she didn't. Which means she didn't just make it up on the fly." "No," I said. "She planned it. And Maribel, she let her." That realization hurt more than any of it. Not that Iris lied, but that my wife believed it. Not just in a moment of doubt, but deliberately, willingly. The woman I'd trusted with every part of me didn't trust me back when it counted. I stood and gathered the papers into a neat stack. My voice felt steadier now, even as the edges of my heart frayed. "I don't think this was ever about a single incident. I think this was a campaign." Toby looked up. "You think they've been painting you as the bad guy for a while now?" "I think," I said, "they've been waiting for a reason to erase me." I went to bed that night with the lights off and the door cracked. No text from Maribel. No missed calls. But I didn't expect them anymore. What I needed now wasn't an apology. It was clarity. This wasn't about convincing her anymore. It was about reclaiming my version of the truth and protecting it before they buried it under another lie. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand, its screen lighting up a dim corner of the motel room I'd rented near my brother Toby's apartment. Maribel's name flashed across the display, but before I could gather the courage to answer, another notification popped in from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ariel, Maribel's cousin. My chest tightened. Ariel had always been a friendly face at family gatherings, someone I thought I could trust. The message read, "Graham, I need to explain what's really happening." I stared at it, confusion and hope wrestling inside me. I tapped back, "Call me." An hour later, my phone rang. I set it on speaker and rested it against an empty coffee mug. Ariel's voice sounded low, urgent, almost shaken. "Graham," she began, "I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't know how deep this went until today." I leaned forward on the lumpy sofa bed, brow furrowed. "Go on," I said. Silence. Then, "Iris has been telling people you're emotionally distant, cold, even cruel. She's been saying you left her out in the cold on purpose, that you wanted out of your marriage and used her injury as an excuse." My stomach churned. "Why would she do that?" I asked softly. Her sigh was heavy. "I don't know. But I overheard her talking to my mother on the phone yesterday. She said she needed a campaign to push you away, to prove you were the villain so Maribel would have to choose her over you." I closed my eyes, picturing Iris leaning conspiratorially, weaving her lies into a narrative. "This isn't just a mistaken memory," I whispered. "This is deliberate." Ariel's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Graham. I never believed her." I asked around. "She's been telling friends at church and neighbors that you were cold to her, that you treated her like a burden." The word burden hit me like a stone. I remembered every time she'd smiled grumpily, but thanked me with a soft word. None of that mattered now if she could twist it into proof of hate. I exhaled slowly, clutching the phone. "Did Maribel hear any of this?" I asked. Ariel paused. She heard bits and pieces. Iris called her in tears, saying he abandoned me. Maribel's heart just went out to her. "She never asked me. She didn't want to upset your wife." A dull ache bloomed in my chest. Maribel had never asked me, trusted her mother's tearful facade instead of giving me the benefit of a doubt. "I appreciate you telling me," I said, voice tight. "But I don't know, something to push back with." There was a long pause then. "I'll gather what I can. Emails, texts, anything where Iris has told people this stuff. I'll send them to you." Relief flickered through me. At least someone in Maribel's circle saw through the performance. As I hung up, I realized that this lie campaign had been in motion long before March 12th. It was methodical. A whispered rumor here, an emotional outburst there, all building a false portrait of me. My phone buzzed again. An email from Ariel with forwarded messages. Iris confiding in her friend Clara about how she missed her daughter's husband because he used to be attentive, suggesting I'd lost interest. Another text to her neighbor claiming I'd shouted at her walker and left her freezing on the front steps. Each message felt like a fresh cut. I printed the emails at a nearby FedEx and stapled them into a packet alongside the clinic logs. Then I drove to the county library and used their scanner to duplicate the pages. I needed hard copies if I ever went to court. Back at Toby's, I spread everything across the dining table. Sign-in logs, security printouts, bank statements, Ariel's emails. The evidence represented months of deceit, my unbroken record of care and Iris's parallel campaign to undermine me. I imagined Maribel's face as she'd see this mountain of proof, the trembling phone call soundbites, the irrefutable clinic signatures, the threats behind the text messages. I pictured her confronting her mother, asking why she'd lied. I pictured her finally understanding that her silence, her refusal to question, had driven me out of my own home. That night, sleep eluded me. I stared at the ceiling and replayed Ariel's confession. She called it twisted, this conspiracy between mother and daughter. But to me, it was simple: betrayal. My own family, pitted against me. My wife, believing a narrative spun from half-truths and fears. I touched the folder of printouts, fingertips brushing the crisp edges. This was no longer just about clearing my name. It was about exposing the truth before they could manipulate another listener, before another lie solidified into fact. At first light, I composed another email to Maribel. Maribel, Iris has been telling friends and family that I was emotionally distant, even cruel, claiming I left her alone on purpose and wanted out of our marriage. Attached are messages from your cousin Ariel confirming this, plus our clinic logs and security stills. This didn't happen by accident. It's a deliberate campaign to make me the villain. I'm willing to talk when you're ready to see all sides of the truth. Graham, I attached scans of Iris's messages to Ariel and photos of the printouts. Before sending, I hesitated. I remembered Maribel's voice, firm: apologize or leave. This wasn't about apology anymore. It was about accountability. I clicked send. As the email whooshed away, I felt a measure of control returning. Lies are shadows, you can't grasp them. But evidence is tangible. It can't be argued away. For the first time since all this began, I believed Maribel might pause and listen. And if she listened, she might remember me, the man who showed up 18 times without fail, who carried Iris's walker, who argued for her mother's comfort over his own, who loved his wife enough to fight for the truth. I slipped the folder into my backpack, ready for whatever came next, knowing this battle was far from over. But that now I had the ammunition to win it. I had barely closed my eyes when the bank notification buzzed through my phone, yanking me from the restless fog of sleep into a cold jolt of disbelief. A $4,000 transfer from our joint account, sent to Iris. The message glowed on the screen in bold red numbers, each digit a hammer blow to my chest. I stared at it, frozen, unable to reconcile the balance I meticulously monitored with these unauthorized digits vanishing into my mother-in-law's pockets. My hand trembled as I tapped the notification, opening the banking app to confirm the transfer details. There it was: payee, Iris Maddox. Date: yesterday, 3:17 p.m. Reference: medical bills. I replayed the events of the previous day, the clinic visit, the drive home, the hollow exchange with Maribel. There had been no discussion, no mention of my wife moving money around on her own, no text, no call, nothing. Only another unilateral decision executed in silence. My heart thundered as I realized the depth of this betrayal. Not only had I been painted as a negligent husband, but now I was being drained financially, too. The weight of it all, medical care, legal fees, emotional fallout, rested squarely on my shoulders, and here was another secret assault. I slammed the phone onto the nightstand, the screen shattering the dark with its impersonal glow, and pulled the covers off in one forceful motion. The room spun slightly as adrenaline spread through my veins. I had to act, but first I needed clarity. I dressed quickly, shrugging into a shirt and jeans, reliving every interaction with Iris in the past 3 months. Each pickup, each apology, each moment of quiet support, now a foundation built on falsehoods. I stormed down the stairs of Toby's apartment building, fist gripping the envelope containing my clinic logs and Ariel's forwarded messages. The crisp, sterile papers felt like ammunition. I jumped into my blue Corolla and pointed it toward the bank branch downtown, determined to freeze the account and piece together the trail of this unauthorized transfer. Inside the bank, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the faint scent of paper and disinfectant clung to the air. I approached the teller's window, sliding my ID across the counter. "I need to put a temporary freeze on our joint account," I said, voice low but firm. The teller, a young woman with a neat ponytail, raised an eyebrow. "Is there suspected fraud?" she asked. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes. A transfer was made without my consent. I believe it's unauthorized." She typed furiously at her terminal, her fingers clattering like raindrops on glass. After a moment, she looked up. "It's frozen. No further withdrawals or transfers will go through." Relief washed over me, mingled with frustration that I had to go to these lengths to stop someone who was supposed to be family. I left the bank clutching a printed freeze confirmation and dialed Maribel's number as soon as I was back in the car. Her voicemail picked up. "Maribel, it's me. Call me as soon as you get this. Someone transferred $4,000 to Iris Maddox from our joint account without my knowledge or consent. I've frozen the account. We need to discuss this." My finger hovered over the send button before pressing it, sending my controlled fury through the ether. I took a deep breath, bracing for the fallout. Minutes later, my phone pinged with a text from Maribel. "I did it." She asked and I sent it. "You left, so I handled it." She needed the money. "I'm doing this for her." Each word blistered against me. She had quietly transferred the money before I even knew there was a problem. No discussion. No consulting me. There was entitlement in her defense of Iris, an unquestioning loyalty that cut deeper than her mother's lies. I slammed the steering wheel with my palm, the echoes of metal on leather mirroring the rage inside me. I decided then to enlist Shane, our mutual friend, to confirm what story Maribel was telling to the outside world. Shane's number flashed on my screen within minutes. He answered with a concerned tone. "Graham, hey, just checking in," he ventured. I cut to the chase. "Maribel said you heard I left Iris stranded and stormed off." There was a pause, and Shane exhaled heavily. "Yeah, she told me you abandoned her outside the clinic and just drove off." She sounded crushed. My stomach knotted again. The story was changing. It had morphed from accidental neglect into cold betrayal. I asked Shane if he believed it. He hesitated. "I mean, I know you, man." But she sounded really shaken. It was hard not to believe her. That admission stung. Even someone who knew me personally had been swayed by the emotional weight Iris wielded, and by Maribel's unquestioning acceptance of that weight. I hung up and took a moment to compose myself. The account was frozen, the logs in hand, my brother ready to help, and my attorney, Charlene, prepared to file a fraud report. But the emotional damage, Maribel siding with her mother, the bank transfer, the community hearing an entirely false narrative, had reached a new level. Someone was systematically rewriting my role in my own life to cast me as the villain, and I had to stop them. I drove to Charlene's office, scanning the streets as I thought through my next moves. The clinic logs, Ariel's emails, the security stills, all of it would form the basis of a formal complaint. The counterfeit loan application, the bank transfer, the identity theft ring being formed, all evidence of a deeper conspiracy. I parked outside her law practice. A modest brick building with glossy windows, and headed inside with determination. Charlene greeted me with a crisp nod. "I hear there's a new development," she said. I laid the freeze confirmation, the transfer notice, and Maribel's text on her desk. Her eyes sharpened as she reviewed each document. "Identity theft, unauthorized transfer." "This escalates things," she muttered. "We'll file this alongside the fraud report for the loan. And we'll send her a cease and desist notice for the unauthorized account activity." I exhaled, relief and resolve mingling. As I walked out of Charlene's office into the late afternoon sun, I felt the heavy urgency of my mission sharpen around me. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, restoring truth in the face of a calculated campaign of lies, and holding those responsible accountable, no matter how much blood they shared with me. I slid into my car, braced my hands on the wheel, and drove toward home, whatever home meant now, with the unshakable knowledge that I would not be pushed aside, financially or emotionally, without a fight. I climbed the stairs to Charlene Morse's law office 2 at a time, breath rasping in my chest, clutching the manila envelope that contained every ounce of proof I'd amassed. The sunlight slanted through the lobby's tall windows, illuminating floating dust motes that looked like tiny judges passing silent verdicts. I paused before her door, took a steadying breath, and knocked. When Charlene opened the door, her sharp eyes locked onto mine with a blend of concern and determination. "You called?" she said quietly, stepping back to let me in. Inside, her office felt cool and orderly. Bookshelves lined with legal tomes, a desk cleared except for a single notepad and a tumbler of water. She gestured to the chair opposite hers. I sat and slid the envelope across the desk. "I think you'll want to see this," I said, my voice low. Charlene unfolded the contents with care. Security stills printed on glossy paper, each image capturing a single frame from the clinic's liability cameras. Iris shuffled from the front entrance toward my car, walker in hand. Then a second frame showed me stooping to hold open the passenger door. A third caught me gently lifting her walker into the trunk. My blue Toyota gleamed under the clinic's harsh parking lot lights. She studied the images, brow furrowing. "This is exactly what we need," she said, placing the photos aside. "Literal proof of your presence." My throat tightened as I watched her pull out a fresh sheet of paper. "These stills corroborate the sign and logs," she continued. "Now we have both written and visual evidence that Iris was never left behind." I nodded, relief mingling with rage. Relief that the truth was irrefutable, rage that it had taken me weeks to compile proof of something so obvious. Charlene tapped her pen against the notepad thoughtfully. "We'll draft a motion to introduce these stills as evidence in divorce proceedings and in a potential defamation suit against Iris and Maribel. Their false statements have caused real damage. Lost reputation, financial drain, emotional distress." Those words, legal and precise, resonated in me like a rallying cry. "I want them to understand the full weight of their actions," I said. Charlene's gaze sharpened. "We'll include a demand for damages and a cease and desist regarding any further misrepresentations." She leaned back, folding her hands. "Now, the loan application." My pulse pounded at the memory of discovering that personal loan, forged in my name with Iris as co-signer and Maribel's email tying her to the application. Charlene opened another folder and spread out printouts, the loan documents, the typed application form, and the email trail showing the confirmation sent to Maribel's account. Each page bore the telltale signs of fraud: mismatched fonts, a hastily typed signature line, and a date stamp that coincided with my absence. "This is identity theft," she said. "We'll file a report with the state attorney's office and pursue criminal charges. And we'll seek restitution." I exhaled, tension easing slightly. The path forward was clear. Charlene wrote down a timeline of next steps: submit defamation claim, file for divorce, report identity theft, request temporary restraining order against any further unauthorized account activity, and schedule depositions with Joel Lancaster and Ariel. "What about Maribel?" I asked. Charlene looked thoughtful. "She may claim she acted under duress or out of concern for her mother. But once we prove she knew the statements were false, her liability becomes clear." I nodded, imagining the day they sat in a courtroom, surrounded by their lies laid bare in spreadsheets, photos, and email logs. I pictured my voice steady as I recounted each betrayal, the accusation, the bank transfer, the manufactured campaign. I would not be the man who walked away from his responsibilities. I would be the man who fought for the truth. Charlene closed her notepad and offered me a firm nod. "I'll prepare the filings. In the meantime, keep gathering any communication you receive: texts, voicemails, letters. And avoid direct contact with Iris or Maribel until we have protective orders in place." She slid the papers back into their folders and handed me a copy of our agreed strategy. I tucked it into my own jacket pocket, feeling a sense of purpose settle around me. As I stood to leave, Charlene laid a hand on my arm. "Graham, remember, this isn't just legal maneuvering. It's about restoring your life, reclaiming the narrative that was stolen from you." Her words resonated deep within my chest. I had spent weeks in limbo, haunted by doubts and accusations, but now I had allies who believed in me and a plan to bring the truth to light. Outside, the late morning sun felt bright on my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I paused at the corner, looking at the street sign curling above traffic lights. The city bustled, people moving on with their lives, unaware of the storm brewing in courtrooms and dining room tables. I realized then that the fight ahead would demand more than legal strategy. It would demand resilience, composure, and unwavering faith in my own integrity. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the gallery until I found the first security still, the snapshot of Iris stepping into my car, her hand reaching for the walker as I held the door. I stared at it, imprinting every detail: the faded floral print on her blouse, the glint of sunlight off my car's hood, the curve of my hand on the door handle. That single frame captured my commitment, my honor, my unshakable truth. I set the phone down and walked away, mind racing with next steps. Contacting the Attorney General's office, updating my brother, sending that package to friends and family with the truth laid bare. I would not rest until every lie had been dismantled, every false impression corrected. And when the day came, Maribel and Iris would find themselves unable to rewrite my story, because I was no longer the man trapped in their frame. I was the man who seized control of his own narrative and refused to be erased. I returned to the house unannounced, walking up the familiar path under the late afternoon sun, each step punctuated by the memory of Maribel's ultimatum. The door stood slightly ajar, as if inviting me into the confrontation I had withheld from her. My heart thudded in my chest, equal parts anticipation and dread. I pushed the door open and called out her name, voice echoing through the foyer. The air was heavy with the scent of Iris's lavender sachet, a sharp reminder of the woman who had set all of this in motion. Maribel appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, her brow furrowed in the same expression I had loved and feared so many times before. She looked at me with eyes I scarcely recognized. There was hurt there, yes, but behind it lay something darker, suspicion. "You came to apologize?" she asked, voice brittle. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. "No," I said. "I came to show you the truth." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the first item, a printed photograph of the clinic's security still from March 12th. The image depicted Iris stepping onto the curb, walker in hand, and me opening the passenger door. My reflection gleamed in the window with unmistakable clarity. I placed the photo on the wooden railing between us. Maribel's gaze shifted from the image to my face, confusion flitting across her features. I reached for the binder at my side, setting it on the hallway table. I flipped it open to the sign and logs, turning to the March 12th entry that recorded Iris's departure at 12:06 p.m., with my name and car description unmistakable. "Here," I said, voice calm despite the tremor in my chest. "The log from that day, signed by Joel Lancaster. It says exactly what happened." I tapped the page with a steady finger. Maribel bent forward to read, her lips parting as she absorbed each typed word, each signature. A long moment passed before she looked up, eyes widening in dawning realization. But then her expression shifted. "That was only one day," she said. "You were late on others." It was a reflex, a guardrail thrown up the instant her certainty wavered. My chest tightened. Had she really clung to every whisper Iris fed her, no matter how scant the evidence? I closed the binder and produced the next envelope. Security stills from February and March, screenshots of the clinic's liability cameras capturing every pickup. One by one, I laid them on the table. February 8th, February 15th, March 5th, March 19th, 18 frames in total, each showing the same sequence. Iris walking to my car, me greeting her, helping her into the passenger seat, lifting her walker into the trunk. I spoke softly, letting each photo speak for itself. "Every appointment," I said. "Every single one." Maribel ran a hand through her hair, leaning heavily against the wall. "But there were days you took longer," she countered. Days when I heard she waited. The memory stung. She had believed a single accusation over 18 clear records. "She's telling you what she wants you to hear," I said. "Not what happened." My words were a whisper, razor sharp. For a moment, I thought I saw her waver. But then she crossed her arms tighter, eyes hardening. "I think you were trying to make her feel like a burden," she said. The accusation cut deeper than any lie Iris had told. It implied malice, deliberate cruelty. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the rush of anger that threatened to boil over. "Maribel, look at me," I pleaded, voice firm. "Do you truly believe I'd use your mother's recovery as an excuse to hurt her? Do you think I'd manipulate her walker in her pain? That I'd risk everything we've built together just to make her suffer?" The silence that followed was more oppressive than any argument. She looked away, nostrils flaring as she fought her own conflict. I stepped closer, gripped her shoulders gently, and lowered my voice to a trembling intensity. "You know me. 15 years, every morning making coffee, every night talking through our days. You trusted me then. Why is my word suddenly worthless?" Tears glistened in her eyes as she drew in a shuddering breath. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of losing her. scared of what it meant if you really felt that way. Her voice cracked with vulnerability. I felt my own defenses soften. Iris took advantage of that fear, I said quietly. She spun a story that made me the enemy. And you believed it because you love her. She closed her eyes, nodding, tears slipping down her cheeks. I did, she whispered. I'm sorry. The apology was fragile, but it was a start. I reached into my coat and withdrew a thick packet of emails. Ariel's messages, Ariel's phone logs, texts from neighbors detailing Iris's accusations. I placed them in Maribel's trembling hands. These show the campaign against me. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. It was a conspiracy. She scanned the pages, her brow creasing with shame and regret as she recognized the deliberate weaving of falsehoods. Why would she do this? She asked, voice small. Because she was afraid of her own loneliness, I replied. She wanted to make sure someone depended on her, even if it meant destroying me. Maribel's shoulders slumped, and she sank to the floor, the evidence scattered around her like fallen leaves. I knelt beside her, drawn by the gravity of her remorse. I never wanted to leave you, I said, voice thick with emotion. I only left because I had no other choice when you believed a lie over my truth. She looked up at me, eyes swollen, and reached for my hand. Come home, she whispered. Fix this with me. My heart surged with relief and cautious hope. I pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in an embrace that spoke of forgiveness and the fragile promise of rebuilding. As we stood in that hallway, surrounded by the scattered remnants of betrayal, I realized the path ahead would be long and uncertain. But in Maribel's arms, I felt the first true sign of reconciliation. I had shown her the truth in full frame, and she had chosen to see me again. In that moment, I knew that love, tested and tempered, could survive even the most calculated deceit. And together, we would face the consequences of Iris's lies, guided by the unwavering clarity of what really happened. I discovered the final betrayal the way most people learn about their own identity being stolen, through a cold, impersonal letter. It arrived in my mailbox, a thin envelope stamped with the logo of a credit bureau I barely recognized. My pulse quickened as I tore it open and unfolded the pages inside. The letter informed me of a personal loan application taken out in my name, co-signed by Iris Maddox, for an amount just under $10,000. It detailed payment terms, interest rates, and an address where I could dispute the application if it wasn't mine. My name was stamped in bold at the top, and beneath it, in smaller print, appeared an email address, Maribel's. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I read the letter twice, 3 times, searching for any hint of a mistake, any caveat that would absolve me of this orchestrated theft. But the paper was clear. Someone had forged my signature, used my personal information, and levered my wife's email to make it all look legitimate. I barely registered the sting of humiliation when I realized the scope of the fraud. This was not merely a financial assault. It was a final, insidious stroke designed to leave me legally entangled, credit destroyed, reputation in tatters. I sank onto my living room sofa, the envelope and letter trembling in my hand. Outside, rain spattered against the windows in an uneven rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I stared at the letter, feeling exposed, vulnerable, and furious all at once. How had they executed this scheme so seamlessly, using the one channel I thought was private? I scrolled through my email archives, searching for the loan confirmation or any message that could have slipped through unnoticed. Nothing. Only routine notifications from work and a single thank you note from Ariel for forwarding her messages. I knew I needed expert help immediately. I dialed Charlene's number with shaking fingers. When she answered on the second ring, her voice was calm, authoritative. I read the letter's contents to her verbatim, each detail more damning than the last. She listened without interruption. When I finished, she exhaled audibly. This crosses the line into felony territory, she said. Identity theft and fraud, for certain. We'll file a criminal complaint and pursue civil damages. And we'll use your wife's email as evidence to show collusion. Relief flickered through me, tempered by the weight of what this meant. Public records, formal allegations, interrogations. My domestic collapse would become a courtroom spectacle. But I had no choice. This had to be stopped. After hanging up, I laid out all the documentation on my dining table. The clinic logs, security stills, bank transfer records, Ariel's messages, and now this loan letter. The neat stacks looked like pieces of a shattered mirror, each reflecting a fragment of betrayal. I touched the top sheet, the first clinic log and remembered how carefully I had gathered evidence. Now, that careful compilation would form the backbone of my defense. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Charlene. Charlene, attached is the loan application letter. It lists a personal loan in my name, co-signed by Iris, and confirms it was processed using Maribel's email. Please advise on next steps. I want to stop this before it damages my credit and my life any further. Graham Holt. I clicked send, then sank back into my chair, mind spinning. The letter was the culmination of their campaign, a final twist of the knife. They had painted me as negligent, manipulative, and now they had accused me of taking out a large loan. If left unaddressed, it could ruin my credit score, hamper my ability to find housing, and isolate me financially. Worse, any default would appear on my record. All because someone behind my back wielded my identity as a weapon. That evening, I sat in a silent vigil, phone beside me ready for Charlene's response. I reflected on the irony. I had believed shielding my wife's email was safe, had not suspected it could be used to implicate me. I wondered how many heads of household had faced similar betrayals, how easily one's life could be manipulated through paperwork and deception. My own orchestrated removal from my home, underscored by a forged loan, felt like the ultimate betrayal. When Charlene's email arrived, it contained a plan. File a police report immediately, send a demand letter to the lender, and prepare motions to expunge any record of the loan from my credit report. She also recommended sending a forensic request to the email provider for login logs to prove the application was made remotely from a device registered to Maribel's account. My resolve coalesced into purpose. I printed the email, grabbed the original loan letter, and drove to the local police station. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. I felt the first stirrings of hope that this final blow could be neutralized. At the station, I sat across from an officer with kind eyes and a notepad. I recounted the entire saga, the false abandonment claims, the bank transfers, the identity theft, and now the loan. I handed him the letter and the evidence packet. He listened intently, scribbled notes, and assured me they would investigate. I left with a case number and a sense that justice might still be within reach. Back in my car, I exhaled, clutching the steering wheel. My reflection in the windshield looked tired but determined. I realized that the campaign waged against me had stretched far beyond petty gossip. It had spiraled into criminal territory. But I was no longer the passive victim. I had taken each piece of proof and built a fortress around my truth. And now, with law enforcement on the case and Charlene's guidance, I would dismantle each falsehood one by one. The man they tried to frame behind my back would stand tall again, his name cleared, his integrity restored. And the final lie, the forged loan, would be the first to crumble. I stood in the doorway of the familiar kitchen, my duffel bag heavy at my feet, every muscle in my body humming with the electricity of confrontation. Maribel sat at the table, her shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed with red from hours of tears. Iris hovered behind her on a stool, clutching her walker like a shield. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window blinds, casting striped shadows across the linoleum floor. In my hand, I carried the final arsenal, a thick stack of documents, loan applications, bank statements, sign-in logs, security stills, and Ariel's forwarded messages. Each piece carefully organized, each sheet a testament to the years of deception that had nearly destroyed me. I stepped into the room and set the duffel down with a soft thud. Maribel looked up, heartache and guilt etched on her face. "What is this?" she whispered. I knelt beside the table and began pulling files from a manila folder, laying them out in neat rows. "This," I said, voice steady, "is every lie you were told, every trust you betrayed, every piece of proof you never asked to see." I started with the clinic logs, 18 pages, each one listing Iris's appointments and my documented pickups. Maribel traced her finger along the lines. February 2nd, 11 a.m., March 12th, 12:06 p.m., April 1st, 2:15 p.m. Her lip trembled. I watched her swallow, absorbing the weight of 18 recorded truths against one false accusation. Next, I placed the security stills side by side. The grainy color frames from the clinic's liability cameras showing me helping Iris into the car, lifting her walker into the trunk, guiding her footsteps. Each still was a frozen moment of my devotion. Maribel's shoulders shook as she stared at the images. Iris's face paled, lips pressing together in shame. I moved on, pulling out bank statements. Then there's this, I said, setting a statement in front of Maribel that highlighted the $4,000 transfer to Iris without my approval. Her eyes flickered to the numbers, money vanishing from our joint account at her behest, and she flinched as if struck. I paused to let her absorb it, to let the enormity sink in. Not only had she believed a lie, she had acted on it, undermining our shared finances without so much as a conversation. I pressed on, retrieving the forged loan application, printed and dog-eared from my own reading. "And this," I said, handing her the letter from the credit bureau that detailed the unauthorized loan in my name, co-signed by Iris and processed through your email. Her hand shook as she took it, eyes wide with shock. "You used my email to steal my credit," I said softly, pain and anger tangled together. "You stamped my name onto a crime." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I moved to the next stack, Ariel's emails. Forwarded messages where Iris confided in her cousin about the campaign against me, where she spun stories of cruelty and abandonment. Maribel read each message, her cheeks hollowing with regret. "Why didn't you ask me?" I asked, voice breaking. "Why did you trust her stories over my truth?" Her gaze flickered to Iris, who hung her head and whispered, "I was scared of being alone." The admission felt small against the mountain of evidence, but it was the first acknowledgement of her motive. I stood and gathered the papers, stacking them carefully into piles: medical logs, visual proof, financial records, fraud documentation, personal communications. "These are the kitchen table files," I said, voice thick with emotion. "All our lives lay bare on this table. You can't ignore this. You can't unsee it." Maribel rose slowly, backing away until her back pressed against the counter. She swallowed hard, eyes brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice raw. "I didn't think." She broke off, unable to complete the sentence. I exhaled, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. I crossed to her and took her hand. "I know you love your mother," I said, voice gentle. "But love doesn't excuse lies. It doesn't excuse betrayal." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I loved her too much," she said. "I wanted to protect her." I squeezed her hand. "Protection shouldn't come at the cost of justice. It shouldn't mean abandoning me." She closed her eyes, nodding, the realization of her actions settling like a weight on her shoulders. I looked at Iris then, standing silent in the corner, her face pale. "Iris," I said, voice calm but firm, "your campaign to paint me as a villain has consequences. You've broken trust, stolen money, and destroyed the foundation of a marriage." Iris's eyes filled with tears as she mumbled, "I was afraid of being alone. I didn't mean." "Fear doesn't justify theft," I interrupted, voice resolute. "You forged a loan. You manipulated bank accounts. You told a story so compelling that Maribel believed it without question." Her shoulders slumped as shame overtook defiance. Maribel stepped between us, taking Iris's trembling hand. "Mom, I'm going to help you fix this," she said softly. "But you have to take responsibility." Iris nodded, tears slipping freely now. "I'll cooperate," she said. "I'll tell everyone the truth." The admission felt like the first thread of redemption. I exhaled, a tired smile tugging at my lips. "Then we begin there," I said. "Together, we start making amends." I looked around the kitchen table, at the piles of truth we'd assembled, the logs, the photos, the statements, the messages. "These files will guide us," I continued. "We'll send them to everyone who matters, friends, family, anyone who heard the lies. We'll make sure the real story is known." Maribel and Iris exchanged a glance, resolve forming in their eyes. As we stood united around the kitchen table for the first time in weeks, I felt a cautious sense of hope. The journey ahead would be long. Legal battles, damaged trust, professional reviews for Maribel's license. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had my wife by my side, Iris willing to confess her wrongdoing, and the unassailable proof laid out before us. The kitchen table files were no longer weapons of betrayal. They were the blueprint for our healing. And together, we would rebuild what had been broken, guided by truth, accountability, and the quiet strength of facing our darkest moments under the harshest light. I settled into my new apartment near the French Broad River as autumn's crispness slipped into each evening breeze. The move had been a blur, boxes stacked in corners, a single photo of Maribel and me on the mantel. Yet the quiet here felt like permission to breathe again. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting the hardwood floors in warm amber. I peeled off my coat, placed the keys on the kitchen counter, and ran my fingers through the documents I'd received that morning. Court filings charging Iris with identity theft, evidence exhibits confirming loan fraud, and a letter from the state board notifying Maribel of the nursing license review. The papers were both a testament to destruction and a roadmap toward justice, and I studied them with a steady calm. I had become the man protected by facts rather than defined by lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Charlene that Iris's arraignment was set for November 5th, and the judge had already issued a restraining order preventing her from contacting me further. Relief washed over me. I typed back a quick, "Thanks. Let's keep moving forward." Then I slipped on my jacket and stepped outside, the river's rushing current calling me toward a sense of normalcy. I jogged down the street, inhaling the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth, each breath reminding me that life still held beauty beyond betrayal. My muscles steadied with each stride, and for the first time in months, I felt aligned, mind, body, and purpose. When I returned home, I found an unexpected package on the doorstep. An unmarked envelope containing printed copies of every letter I'd sent to friends and family, annotated with responses from those I'd reached out to. Some messages expressed shock at the truth finally revealed. Others extended apologies for their own silence or disbelief. I read one from my old college roommate Jason. "Graham, I'm sorry I doubted you. You've always been the friend who showed up. I filed the correction on Facebook, and I'll testify if needed." Beneath it lay a note from my neighbor Sophie. "I'm proud to know the real you. Dinner at my place tonight." Their words felt like lifelines thrown across a turbulent sea. I folded the letters, tucked them into my desk drawer, and penned a brief reply. "Thank you for believing in me. Let's move forward together." Each returned faith felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a rebuilt life. Dinner with Sophie that evening was exactly the antidote I needed. Her apartment smelled of roasting vegetables and fresh basil. We shared a meal of pasta and salad, talking about everything except lawsuits and betrayal. We laughed over childhood memories of misadventures on our college campus and reminisced about late-night coffee runs. For the first time in so long, I wasn't Graham Holt, the accused. I was simply Graham, a friend enjoying a meal. When I left for home, the crisp air bit at my cheeks, but my heart felt warm. I walked back past the river, moonlight dancing on the water's surface, as if to remind me that darkness always yields to light. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, drafting the final package I would send to every person who had fought to rewrite my story. It included a cover letter explaining the false campaign, copies of the clinic logs, security stills, bank statements, and a link to the public court documents charging Iris with identity theft and fraud. I attached a short personal note. "You've heard one version. Here's the complete truth." I paused before hitting send, thinking of the power of clarity and the importance of controlling my own narrative. Then I clicked send all. By afternoon, responses trickled in, expressions of relief, offers of continued support, and questions about coordinating statements for the ongoing divorce proceedings. I printed the emails confirming I'd regained possession of joint assets and that the court had recognized the fraudulent activity. Each confirmation bolstered my conviction that the truth could not be hidden if laid bare in full measure. I closed my laptop and stepped onto the balcony, gaze drifting over the river's expanse. I whispered, "I am here. I am real." The wind seemed to answer with a soothing whoosh, as though the world acknowledged my presence. In the weeks that followed, my daily routine settled into a steady rhythm. Legal meetings with Charlene on Tuesdays, coffee catch-ups with Jason on Thursdays, and physical therapy sessions at the clinic where my journey had begun. Each appointment felt less like a reminder of betrayal and more like proof of my resilience. Joel Lancaster greeted me with a nod of recognition, and I handed him a thank you note and a gift card for his cooperation. He smiled, eyes bright with genuine warmth. "Glad to see you back," he said. I nodded, smiling in return, understanding that restoration was a two-way street. I reclaimed my name, and he reclaimed mine with his testimony. At home, I applied for new credit accounts to undo the damage done by that forged loan. I requested letters from the credit bureau confirming the expungement of false records. Phantoms of stress still flickered in my chest when I looked at my credit report, but each correction erased a mark made by deceit. And slowly, the numbers in my bank account began to reflect my own earnings, not unauthorized transfers. I set automatic reminders to monitor my credit and account statements. A small act of vigilance that felt like armor for my peace of mind. One chilly evening, I walked to the riverbank and paused at the edge, watching ripples under the glow of street lamps. I pulled out my phone and recorded a brief voice memo. I am not the story they tried to write for me. I am the story I choose to live. I listened to my own voice, steady and clear, and felt an unexpected surge of pride. I tucked the phone into my pocket and stood in the quiet, the river's current carrying away lingering doubts. When Iris's case concluded, the judge convicted her of identity theft and ordered restitution, financial penalties, and mandatory counseling. Maribel's nursing license review concluded with a formal reprimand but allowed her to continue practicing under conditions. She and I met at the courthouse afterward, outside in the pale winter light. We stood together, watching people pass by in coats and scarves. She clasped my hand, eyes brimming with remorse and determination. "Thank you for bringing me back to reality," she said softly. I squeezed her hand, warmth flowing between us. "Thank you for finding your way back," I replied. As I walked home that day, snow began to fall in gentle flakes, each one a silent promise of renewal. I returned to my apartment, set a fresh pot of coffee, and gazed out at the snow-blanketed world. In that peaceful moment, I understood that the campaign against me had ultimately proven my strength, the strength to gather evidence, to confront betrayal, and to reclaim my life. I was the man who had shown up 18 times to help a recovering mother-in-law, who had faced falsehoods with unwavering resolve, and who had refused to be rewritten. And now, standing in the soft glow of a new beginning, I knew my story belonged to me, and no one could ever take that away.